What's up, guys? Welcome back to Analytical Strategy and the finale of Australian Survivor. We have had 24 episodes and 24 recaps on this channel, and it has now all come to a close. To be honest, I wasn't even planning on doing these recaps when the season started. It just kind of all happened, so it's been a huge grind, and thanks to each of you for coming along for this crazy ride with me, and really just being so active in this community. It's been a really fun journey. But we have gotten down to the final three: Hayley, George, and Flick. Now, going back to the early stages of this season, when I was first introduced into this cast, I could probably see two of these names going this deep, and potentially even making the finals, but not all three. So Hayley was my winner's pick from day one. I had a really good vibe about her. I think she got pretty lucky to get this far by some fortunate twists in the game, but she did play the card she was dealt extremely well, and I consider her to be a very top tier player. Flick was another one I also thought could really go far in this game from the first few episodes we saw of her. She was a really strong figure in the Brawn tribe in the opening few episodes, and while she wasn't the hugest player or character as the season went on, she does have a lot of great social and mental characteristics to go far in the game, so I also think she is a great player overall. And of course, then there is also George, who I believe in my first recap I said something along the lines of he had one of the worst opening episodes I've ever seen in Survivor, and I really couldn't see him ever getting far. I never ever thought he would have any chance to get this deep in the game on first impressions, and in the end, he was the only one of this three that did not get voted out of this game, so he really played an unbelievable game this season and really made this season what it was. He is a producer's dream. So we heard the final three give their pep talks about why they deserve the prize prior to the final immunity challenge of this season. And this challenge basically looked like a torture chamber, standing on thin metal spikes with identical looking metal spikes slowly coming towards you at regular intervals. But before the torture began, we got introduced to some family from each of the remaining contestants who would be there to watch them in this challenge. Now, honestly, to me, this was a little bit of a shock. I really didn't expect to see any family this season due to the COVID protocols, which I thought was why we saw more family rewards than usual. But I guess as this was filmed in Australia and not internationally, it was feasible for this to occur. I'd be really surprised if any loved ones' visits occurred in the upcoming US Survivor season, with it being in Fiji, but we will wait and see very shortly. And as always, it is a very emotional time for the contestants when family is involved, without seeing them for such a long time. And especially for Flick this season, after sticking it out in the game with the passing of her mother happening, so it was particularly great for her more than anyone to get that support during the game before it all came to a close. So after getting some love, it was time for some pain. And as I've mentioned in previous recaps, going into the final challenge, I really felt these types of endurance challenges really favoured Hayley, so I did expect her to get the win. In a preview of this episode, we saw a glimpse into this challenge, and they were all in agony during the night time, so for this to start during the day was a little bit of a surprise. This challenge honestly was pretty epic, but it also seemed extremely dangerous at the same time. The safety regulations that would have had to happen would have been huge. I mean, if that top component gave way, it could have literally crushed the person in it. Or if a contestant slipped and fell, they could have broken bones or even worse, so it did seem a little bit intense. But I would expect nothing less for a finale challenge. So George was the first to drop after 4.5 hours, which was a pretty damn good effort for him, I must say. Especially given there's been times where he's given up just looking at a challenge. So I think he really did give it his best effort, especially given it was a challenge that really didn't suit his skill set. So then it came down to Hayley versus Flick. I mean, Hayley on the surface looked absolutely fine this whole challenge, whilst Flick was battling to the bitter end, knowing if she lost this challenge she would not make that final two. And after 5 hours and 17 minutes, Flick could not take the pain any longer, was assisted off, and Hayley won this challenge and guaranteed herself a spot in that final two. It was pretty hard to watch Flick at times fight through the agony, but it was an epic battle nonetheless, and I really think Hayley could have lasted an extremely long time. These types of challenges are made for her. It was a huge effort by Hayley, massive credit. She has been a real challenge beast this season, potentially even rivaling Brooke as Australia's best challenge competitor ever. I really think it would be a close contest between those two, no doubt. But a huge congratulations to her for winning this final challenge. So after the challenge, the contestants said goodbye to their loved ones and they headed straight to Tribal Council. And it was really looking like the writing was on the wall for Flick. George and Flick gave their pitches as to why they should stay and why the other should go. But to me, Hayley had this decision made days ago. Flick had to go home this vote as she indeed did have jury votes on lock. And with her gone now, those votes are available for Hayley to obtain to receive in that final 2. And that is exactly what occurred, with Flick being the final member of the jury, and the final 2 has been crowned, with Queen Hayley and King George. I personally don't think we could have had a better final 2 this season. I think these two were the 2 standout players by quite a long way, to be honest. And it's very rare that 2 huge gamers get to the finale, especially in Australian Survivor, so that was pretty epic to see. Prior to saying any of the final tribal, I think Hayley is the favourite leading into it with this particular jury, but you never know. George has been known for being a great spokesman and can persuade some votes to come his way. But I was preparing for a very competitive battle between these 2 great contestants. And also, when I say particular jury, for example, I think this jury would appreciate challenge performance more than your average jury. I think as this cast was also heavily recruited, so they potentially wouldn't appreciate big moves as much as a cast full of superfans, which could be to George's demise. But ultimately, you need to play to your jury, and that's the aim of the game, and whoever gets the votes deserves it, and that's all there is to it. So within the final tribal council, I'm going to highlight some areas that both impressed me, and also areas that I think could have been answered better by this final 2. Now firstly, I think both of their opening speeches to the jury were extremely good. They both explained their games very clearly and directly, and owned up to the way they played the game, to get to the position they are in now. So it was a great start by them both. Then Laura kicked things off with the questions, and she asked George what he learnt about himself, and I personally didn't really like his answer too much to this question. I may be wrong, but I thought she may have been seeking a pretty personal answer about individual growth. But I think his response was a little bit too game body, as he reverted back to his strategic dominance. Now this was similar to his response to Andrew about regrets in the game. He said he didn't have any. He could have said he wished he didn't speak to someone in a specific manner at an individual point of time in the game. But again, he went back onto how good he was strategically in this game. Now I think this was a theme throughout this tribal for George. He focused a little bit too much on the strategic portion of the game, but completely missed the points about the social components, which especially at the final tribal council is really the most important part. Basically, you want the jury to like you, and you want them to give you their vote. And owning up to your moves is absolutely a good start to this. But you don't want to come across as being too egotistical and reverting back to strategy only, which really is only one part of the game. You need to be personal in Survivor, more than just strategic. I think Hayley did this very well, saying she would work with everyone still in the game if this game were to start over, rather than no one, due to these social bonds that she's made. I actually really think this was a great question by Gerald and a really great answer by Hayley. As mentioned, I also think this particular jury really appreciated the physical component of the game far more than your average jury. And when those questions arose, Hayley answered these far better than George. And she also deliberately drew on physical characteristics throughout a lot of her answers, as she knew they would appeal to this particular jury. Actually, I think she basically answered all questions better than George, to be honest. Again, being far more personal, rather than just focusing on the strategy and fulfilling a resume in Survivor. Again, I can't reiterate this enough. You need to appeal to the people sitting in front of you, no one else. If it was a jury full of strategists, George gave great answers, but it wasn't. So he talked way too much about his strategy and only his strategy. When Emmett said, "Would you change your game knowing you've burned everyone here?" He should have said, "Yes, absolutely I would," as obviously I didn't play the right way for this specific jury based on the way you're all speaking to me. I also really think George should have emphasised that he never got voted out of this game, and Hayley did. She drew on that experience as a positive and turned it into a good thing that she got voted out. And George absolutely should have reiterated multiple times that he never got voted out, especially when he was pitching such a big strategic game. But between the two and what we got to see from this tribal council, I think Hayley smashed it out of the park with her answers. I think all her answers were great, and she really outdid George in these answers overall. And with, by the sounds of it, multiple jury votes being up for grabs, in the end it looked as though the jury agreed with Hayley being crowned the sole survivor of Brains vs Brawn. Absolutely deserving winner, and a huge congratulations to her for winning in a 7-2 final vote, I believe, in the end. George looked to get the votes of Laura and Cara, with Hayley cleaning up the rest. Now, coming into this episode, I did think she was going to get the win. I thought it was going to be either a 7-2 or a 6-3 vote. However, I expected George to get Cara's vote and then either potentially Way or Baden's as well in the end rather than Laura's. But again, a huge congratulations. I love seeing superfans win the show, so I really would have been content with either of these two taking out the crown, and ultimately Hayley got it done. A huge congratulations to her. But that brings us to the end of this season and the end of these Australian Survivor recaps. Now, I know I've said this many times before, but again, thanks to each of you for tuning in and being a part of this. I wouldn't have made these if it wasn't for you guys watching, so I do really appreciate it. Now, US Survivor kicks off next week, and I'm really excited to see how it plays out, especially after having a hiatus with some potential changes to the game. So I'm sure there will be heaps to discuss in this upcoming season as well. So my attention will shift solely to US Survivor for the foreseeable future. So make sure if you aren't already to subscribe to the channel to ensure you stay tuned for future videos as well. This is Analytical Strategy signing out once again, and I will see you on the next one. Bye for now.